Hi, I'm Detective Incognito. Welcome to another investigation. I explore strange events, forgotten discoveries, and questions that still challenge what we know about our world. What you're about to hear might change the way you see everything. Your brain is lying to you right now, and you'll never know which memories are real. Thousands of people share identical false memories about events that never happened. They remember details with absolute certainty. Yet neuroscientists have discovered why these collective false memories occur. The answer lies not in parallel universes or quantum phenomena, but in the architecture of the human brain itself. Understanding this reveals something profound about how memory actually works. Subscribe now to discover how your brain creates memories that never happened and why you can't tell the difference. Like this video, if you want to know which part of your brain is playing these cognitive tricks. The explanation begins with a structure buried deep in your temporal lobe. The hippocampus sits at the center of memory formation. This seahorse-shaped structure processes experiences and consolidates them into long-term storage. But neuroscientists discovered something crucial about the hippocampus. The same brain region responsible for storing memories also handles imagination. When someone repeatedly imagines an event, the hippocampus processes that imagined scenario, using identical mechanisms it uses for actual experiences. Over time, the brain can begin treating frequently imagined scenarios as genuine memories. Aiinnovation, a researcher at the University of Potsdam, noted this overlap suggests important consequences for understanding false memories. Memory doesn't exist as a single snapshot stored in one location. Instead, memories are engrams, networks of neurons distributed across multiple brain regions. During consolidation, the hippocampus transfers information to the prefrontal cortex for permanent storage. This transfer process is vulnerable to distortion. Functional magnetic resonance imaging studies conducted throughout the 2010s revealed something striking. When people recall false memories, brain scans show activation patterns virtually identical to those produced by genuine memories. Aaron Bonner Jackson at the Cleveland Clinic emphasized that memory is not a carbon copy of reality, but a reconstruction, influenced by numerous factors. The medial temporal lobe, which includes the hippocampus, changes with age. These changes correlate with increased false memory formation. Neuroimaging studies of people experiencing Mandela-like errors show that the same neural networks activate, regardless of whether memories are accurate or fabricated. This explains why false memories feel as vivid and convincing as real ones. The brain cannot distinguish between them. At the neurological level, understanding why specific patterns emerge requires examining research from 1932. British psychologist Frederick Bartlett at Cambridge University conducted experiments that would reshape memory science. He asked participants to read an unfamiliar Native American folktale called War of the Ghosts. When testing recall minutes or even years later, Bartlett discovered systematic distortions. People omitted unfamiliar cultural details. They transformed strange elements into more familiar concepts. They restructured narratives to align with their existing knowledge frameworks. Bartlett called this process effort after meaning. The brain, confronted with confusing or unfamiliar information, automatically reshapes it into something more comprehensible. He identified schemas as organized packets of knowledge that facilitate understanding, but simultaneously produce distortions. When you imagine a psychologist's office, you probably envision books and diplomas. If someone actually had a picnic basket in their office, you might not remember it, because it doesn't fit the schema. Clock faces provide another example. Most people, when drawing a clock from memory, write the 4 as IV. Traditional clock faces actually use 3, but the Roman numeral schema overrides accurate recall. The Monopoly man's non-existent. Monocle fits perfectly with schemas about wealthy elites. When people visualize rich characters, monocles appear frequently. In cultural representations, the brain fills gaps with what makes schematic sense, rather than what actually exists. Confabulation represents a more active process, where the brain spontaneously invents details to fill memory gaps. While confabulation is associated with neurological conditions, it also occurs in healthy individuals. Jim Cohn at the University of Virginia developed the Lost in the Mall experimental procedure. Researchers provided family members with childhood narratives, one of which was fabricated. The invented story typically involved getting lost in a shopping mall as a child. Remarkably, many participants not only believed the false event occurred, but spontaneously added elaborate details. Elizabeth Loftus at UC Irvine applied this methodology to larger samples, finding that approximately 25% of subjects failed to recognize the implanted event as false. Confabulation increases with age, as the medial temporal lobe, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex undergo structural changes. Functional brain imaging provides evidence that decreased functioning in these regions correlates with increased false memory formation. The process becomes more frequent when people repeatedly unpack and examine memories. Each time a memory is recalled, it becomes vulnerable to modification. The brain doesn't maintain clear boundaries between imagined elaboration and experienced reality. This explains why Mandela effect memories become more detailed over time. As people discuss and visualize these false events, they inadvertently add layers of fabricated detail that feel increasingly authentic. Source monitoring refers to the cognitive process of identifying where information originated. The brain stores content but often loses track of the source. In 1974, Elizabeth Loftus and John Palmer conducted a landmark experiment. At UC Irvine, they showed participants footage of a car accident, then asked questions about what they witnessed. One group heard, "How fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other?" Another group heard, "How fast were they going when they hit each other?" A week later, participants were asked whether they saw broken glass. In the footage, those who heard smashed were significantly more likely to report seeing broken glass. In reality, no broken glass appeared in the video. This demonstrated the misinformation effect, suggestibility, the tendency to incorporate external information into memory, operates continuously. When misinformation is introduced after an event, it compromises memory fidelity. The internet amplifies this effect exponentially. A misquotation like "Luke, I am your father" circulates millions of times across social media. Each exposure strengthens the neural pathway associated with the false version. Eventually, even people who've watched Star Wars repeatedly might recall the popularized misquotation. Rather than the actual dialogue, social media creates echo chambers, where false memories reinforce themselves through repetition and social validation. Research indicates that up to 25% of the time, people cannot reliably distinguish between events they experienced and events they merely imagined or heard about. Contemporary neuroscience research continues refining understanding of these phenomena. Wilma Bainbridge's work at the University of Chicago demonstrated that visual Mandela effects aren't merely individual quirks, but environment-dependent phenomena. Specific features of images consistently trigger identical false memories across populations. A 2020 study published in Psychological Science found that 76% of adults make detectable memory errors. Under controlled experimental conditions, researchers emphasize that memory is fundamentally malleable, rather than a static recording. Factors including stress, sleep deprivation, and nostalgia blur the boundaries between imagination and memory. No scientific evidence supports explanations involving parallel universes, quantum consciousness, or reality shifts. The scientific consensus treats the Mandela effect as a cognitive phenomenon, rooted in how neural networks process, store, and retrieve information. The question remains how vulnerable human memory truly is to suggestion and environmental influence. The implications extend beyond curiosity about pop culture trivia. Legal systems rely on eyewitness testimony. Personal identities are built on autobiographical memories. Historical understanding depends on accurate recollection. Understanding memory's vulnerability becomes increasingly crucial. As artificial intelligence advances and synthetic media proliferates, what neuroscience reveals about the Mandela effect is that memory isn't a reliable recording system. It's a reconstructive process, influenced by schemas, suggestions, neural overlap between imagination and recall, source monitoring failures, and the brain's relentless drive to create coherent narratives from fragmentary information. The Mandela effect isn't a glitch in reality. It's evidence of shared cognitive architecture. Humans possess the same brain structures, process information through identical mechanisms, and exhibit the same vulnerabilities to memory distortion. This commonality explains why specific false memories emerge consistently across populations who've never communicated. Understanding this makes us better thinkers. It teaches intellectual humility. It demonstrates that certainty doesn't equal accuracy. The most vivid memory might be entirely fabricated. The most confident recollection might be wrong. This knowledge doesn't diminish human cognition. It illuminates how remarkably the brain constructs meaning from chaos. Your brain doesn't lie to deceive you. It reconstructs reality to make sense of infinite complexity. And sometimes, in that beautiful, messy process, it creates conviction where only confusion existed. The question isn't whether to trust your brain, it's understanding how it works, so you can think more critically, question more effectively, and recognize that memory, like all cognitive processes, requires constant calibration against external evidence. The Mandela effect isn't a mystery to fear. It's a window into the extraordinary machinery that makes human consciousness possible. If you liked what you just saw, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. Leave your opinion in the comments below to let me know what you thought. Thanks for sticking around, and see you in the next video.